Prop 64 has really been devastating for this community.
It's incredible when you look back at it, how it came about, how fast it grew into a huge business, how fast they wiped it out, and how fast it became a terror game.
Cannabis has always been more than a plant. It's been a battleground between medicine and stigma, freedom and fear, small business and big money. How America chooses to handle this one crop says more about us, our politics, our economy, and our values than most people realize.
We saw a huge dynamic shift, and we saw a robbery of the small farmer.
Of course, the drug companies wanted it not to be seen as a rival to their drugs.
It was obvious that we needed to take the patients off of the battlefield. We needed to carve out some protections for them.
My history with the plant, it's involved, and I was heavily into distribution and selling product, and unfortunately at one point in time I did get busted.
Hit it!
Getting raided, that definitely sucks.
It was dangerous to be growing it, dangerous to be having it on your property. Cultivation was a felony. If law enforcement caught you growing it, you were going to jail, and you'd probably lose your land as well. It was a delicate thing. It was something that wasn't talked about. It was something you didn't ask people about. You don't ask people what they do for a living. It was very secretive.
I've been arrested my whole life over pot since I was a teenager.
Later on in the years, as people started growing in their front yards, as it got a little looser, and people started figuring out that that's where all the cannabis is at people's homes, they're drying it and trimming it there, these home invasions started happening in our little neighborhood. People would get, people would roll up in the middle of the night with guns, with masks on, and tie you up and beat you up and take all your cannabis, and they would start coming in later and later when they'd realize it would be all trimmed already, coming in December and rob people. So it really got to where there was no safe time of the year.
Look, it's been a rough road for the cannabis entrepreneurs. All of us have been in so much trouble. The federal police, the DEA, the tax agencies.
Worse yet, being in a shop with your duffel bag and getting stuck in a shop and you can't leave because cops are outside.
The old days were the outlaw days, and I'm glad that I came up in those days, because as happy as I am for legalization, and this is everything we've been fighting, working towards, legalization changes things.
The politicians realized they could cut themselves a nice fat slice of this revenue.
Well, they saw our numbers, and they were just like, oh, we got to tax this.
Once Prop 215 got passed, it became court battle after court battle. Who is sick enough? What does the law actually say? What are you really allowed to do? And it was all predicated on the fact that law enforcement was lying about marijuana.
Cannabis reform in America didn't begin with billion-dollar companies. It began with patients. Cannabis has been a documented medical tool for over 2,500 years, used in traditional medicine from Asia to the Middle East for pain relief, sleep, inflammation, and digestive disorders. Humanity trusted it long before governments banned it. As states legalized and science advanced, the industry evolved. Small farmers planted hemp for the first time in generations. Local shops popped up on main streets, and corporations, from wellness brands to beverage giants, moved in fast, turning cannabis into one of the most complex, rapidly growing markets in the country. Then came a curveball, buried inside H.R. 5371, the Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act of 2026. Congress rewrote the federal definition of hemp. Section 781 capped products at 0.4 milligrams of total THC per container, and cracked down on any cannabinoid that behaves like THC.
Colleagues, the restrictive cannabis bill is on the table. Discussion's closed. We move to vote.
About time.
Paddles up!
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Bill passes. Keep it quiet, folks.
Shutting the door.
The full impact is still unknown. A $28 billion industry from mom-and-pop growers to large-scale manufacturers has been thrown into limbo. Jobs, rural infrastructure, supply chains, even entire local economies now hang in the balance. This is the story of progress, pushback, corporatization, and the people caught in the middle, as America decides what cannabis should be and who gets to survive.
I'm Chris Conrad. I've been a cannabis activist since 1988. It originated in an argument of whether it's possible to legalize marijuana or not, and I was the only person who thought it was possible.
I'm a longtime cannabis / drug policy reform / human rights and civil rights activist.
I've been fascinated with the smell of weed and everything associated with it since at a very young age. As I got older, I definitely saw the opportunity of participating on the business side of things.
The early days of the cannabis industry for me were in the mid-90s. Being let into this world that was very secretive, you felt very special to be a part of it. It was very community focused. It was very neighborhood focused.
I always felt guilty about my cannabis use through my teens because the stigma to stoners and that you were less than and that it was a bad choice and that you're stupid and it was going to make you stupider and it was all horrible. And I felt that kind of oppression, that guilt of using it for a while.
I was a hyperactive kid. I was probably going to be put on Ritalin because I was really overamped. I was doing sugar and a bunch of Cheerios and all the garbage they're giving us. And I smoked that and I just found my ally. It was immediately love at first sight for me because I needed that to be able to just balance myself.
The very first thing I remember about thinking about cannabis, I was 16, and I remember me and my friend were talking, and she was like, "Oh, it's so bad," and I was like, "Yeah, it's so bad," but in my head I was thinking, I can't wait to try it.
I'm just a kid who likes to smoke weed, and I think that's still what all of this is, to be honest.
Well, I started smoking cannabis in 1969. What's odd about that was I was a Catholic and I was a seminarian, and I had lost faith in the Catholic Church. When I smoked marijuana, I thought I was having a more spiritual experience from smoking marijuana than I had from going to Mass. And so that was pretty profound in my life, considering that was my goal, was I was planning on being a priest.
So how did you get into growing?
Growing, my first year, I used Ed Rosenthal's book. We had this little house in Santa Cruz on the beach, and I wanted to grow. And back then it was a felony. It was big time jail for that. But I mean, nobody even knew what they were looking for. There was no DEA. There was nobody looking for, no cops. People were clueless.
Yeah, no, I was pretty young when I started. When I got into it legally is sort of all of how you define legal.
If there's one thing everybody agrees on, it's that the cannabis laws are a maze. What's legal in one state is completely illegal in the one next door. It's medically approved for cancer patients, but it's still federally illegal. So that creates a huge gray area of where you're allowed to possess it and where you're allowed to consume it. You can sell it with a license, but in some places you can't grow it, transport it, or even put the money in a bank without getting side-eyed like you're running a cartel. Medical, recreational, hemp, THC, CBD, every category has its own rulebook. For a lot of people, especially the elderly, it's too much trouble to figure out what exactly they're allowed to use and where exactly they're allowed to get it. That's why digging into the history matters, because none of this makes sense until you understand how we got here.
The younger generation who are growing up in a world where there's dispensaries. They don't know a world where cannabis was illegal. I just want to make sure that, well, for posterity in general, but especially for the younger generation, to get these stories, these important people, important events in cannabis culture history recorded in one place.
Everybody knows, not just Martin Luther King, but people know the names Rosa Parks, John Lewis, the Bridget Selma. How many people know about Dennis Peron and Todd McArea and the San Francisco Cannabis Buyers Club? Equally heroic figures.
Long before cannabis was cool, legal, or profitable, a handful of people took the heat to tell the truth. Dennis Peron fought on the front lines of compassion in San Francisco, pushing for medical access when the country wanted to look the other way. Jack Herer traveled the nation with a suitcase full of facts, insisting, loudly and relentlessly, that hemp and cannabis could change the world. The activists like Debbie Goldsbury helped build the early patient networks, dispensaries, and educational campaigns that later became the foundation of modern legalization. These were all the people that were doing these things not because it was profitable, but because they believed in the plant, and they wanted the plant to be legal so that we wouldn't be getting arrested. They weren't thinking about the profit that was going to be made by corporations.
To be a grower in Humboldt in the 90s, you were carrying on a legacy of, decades of culture. It was what was happening, man. There was no internet. This was your secretive community of people that were all doing the same thing, loved being in nature, loved being out in the forest. Being a grower in Humboldt in the 90s was the best, dude. It was a vibe. It was, the money was good. Nobody was getting rich yet, but you could make enough money either as a trimmer or just planter or whatever to live a good life. The country was still doing pretty good. Inflation wasn't too bad. If you pulled 10 pounds back there, you were buying land that year. It was worth the risk, very much so.
We had these medical cannabis clubs starting up. I mean, Dennis started the first big one in San Francisco, even before Prop 215. He had like 9,000 clients at his medical marijuana club on Market Street. And gradually it started spreading, first through Northern California, and then around 2006 or so, it took hold in Southern California. And there were, literally hundreds of these cannabis clubs. And people were looking around and seeing, well, there's all these places where people are going in and they're buying marijuana. And at some places, these clubs that were starting up, help reinvigorate a part of town which was sort of run down or something like that, or stimulated sales for the local donut shop and so forth. So it wasn't such a big step to think about legalization.
We were interested in civil rights, and cannabis was obviously a civil rights issue since it treated us like criminals, and we didn't feel like criminals because we used cannabis.
I started High Times in 1994. I was there for 21 years, and during that time, I got to learn about and meet all the great figures in cannabis history: John Sinclair and Stephen Gaskin, Ina May Gaskin, Jack Herer. And at the time, as a young person, I didn't even realize I knew who they were, but I didn't realize that now, 30 years later, and I look back and that at the time I just thought, oh, they're these crazy hippie people, and then you learn later how important these people were, the things that they did. And not just the fact that I want them to appreciate the gravity of what happened as far as people getting raided, people getting locked up, people, all those things are important, but also the fun and the excitement of all that, of the culture and standing up to the government and standing up to the man and fighting for righteous causes, and that spirit, that activist spirit, that outlaw spirit needs to continue.
The government systematically removed this information from, even the Library of Congress, and we couldn't find the information easily presented to us. We used to have to, my activism started off going to Kinko's and photocopying parts of the book Jack Herer wrote and handing them out at colleges and at concerts and at anywhere we could, in front of supermarkets, gathering signatures for our initiative, trying to talk one-on-one to people as if we were going to slowly convince the world that cannabis prohibition was wrong.
It got to the point where there were scary times, of course. First time I got busted, there was a confidential informant. I got raided at my home by the DEA, fought my case, lost, and got sentenced to 16 months state prison. And came home, was on parole, did my thing and never really stopped being involved in the industry. And lo and behold, didn't know who the confidential informant was. Unbeknownst to me, bumped back into the guy. He started slanging bud to me again, and I got busted again.
The DEA got formed in, I think, 1972 or 73, but they hadn't activated. They really didn't know what they were going to do. So they spent about 12 or 13 years, till the mid-'80s, before they ramped it up and came after us.
When the war on drugs hit, cannabis got swept into the same category as cocaine and heroin.
All right, first up, cocaine. Slide it under Schedule 1.
And heroin right beside it.
Nixon's administration labeled it Schedule 1, no medicinal value, high potential for abuse, even though his own advisors told him it didn't belong there. Entire communities were targeted, while the real heavy drugs kept doing real damage. And that decision didn't just shape law enforcement, it shaped culture, fear, and the national story we're still trying to rewrite today.
Lives have been destroyed and shattered by the way our drug war was operating and the way the marijuana laws were written.
In 1 year, I had a guy get busted in San Jose for 6,000 pounds of Thai, and he got 6 months at Elmwood County Jail. The next year, that was a 20-year prison sentence. And they just came at us. They came at us on that side, and then they formed CAMP, which is the California Cannabis Eradication thing, and then CAMP hit at the same time. The military landed up here at Spy Rock and in Humboldt in that same time frame, 84, 85, and just said, okay, we're done. Now you're going to go to jail. If we get you with 900 plant, you're doing 20 years in prison. And so that's why everybody really, the plant counts, no seeds, everything was really low for a long time because of that risk. And so right there in the middle of the 80s, they just wally-whomped us.
Millions and millions of people have lived in fear, not gotten proper treatment for epilepsy and other conditions. It's hard to quantify the tragedy.
All right, there's the war on drugs. They're telling us marijuana is like basically as dangerous as, heroin, and it's a deadly drug. But at the same time, there's a program that the federal government has called the Investigative New Drug Program from the Drug Administration, DEA, the DEA. So they do it for like drugs that are super important, like it's going to cure blah. We can bypass the normal FDA process on an emergency basis, and we can get cannabis to people, okay? So the feds had a program. And then the feds were shipping people these tins of cannabis, 300 joints. So we met LV Musica, who was one of those medical marijuana patients. She had glaucoma. She had been arrested for using cannabis to lower her ocular pressure, and she fought a case in Florida and ended up getting on the federal Compassionate Investigative New Drug Program. So I learned about medical marijuana firsthand from Elvie, and everywhere we'd go, the war on drugs, we'd be like, we're here with Elvie Musica. She's like in her 50s. She has glaucoma. She's got her 300 joints from the federal government. This is medicine. And she was a very good speaker and super compassionate and just, we were blowing the lid off the reality of the war on drugs.
The stories became so important in creating social change in this country, and that really helped pass Prop 215, the first law in California to create medical rights for patients to not go to jail for using the medicine. That really helped us. So that opened the door, it changed, the vision of what marijuana was and the promise of marijuana in our lives.
For millions of people, cannabis isn't a trend, it's a medicine. Cancer patients use it to eat and sleep. Veterans lean on it to quiet PTSD when nothing else works. People with all kinds of medical conditions often find more relief using cannabis than the pills they're provided by their doctor. And yet, despite all these stories, all that proof, cannabis is still treated federally like it has no medicinal value at all. For patients, that disconnect isn't political, it's personal.
Well, Dr. Mikaria had already been published. He'd written the Marijuana Medical Papers, a review of the medical literature from 1839 to 1937. He had a list of a lot of different illnesses and symptoms that cannabis could help. It was a wonderful thing to have a consultant like that knew about that medicine and the benefits. His work made me realize that people had been using it for centuries for medical purposes.
The first time I started going around a medical cannabis dispensary and meeting real patients, people in wheelchairs, people who had HIV, people who were dealing with cancer, that blew my mind, because up until then I'd only been in the cultivation community and hadn't been exposed to people who this plant was saving their lives. And seeing the Rick Simpson film documentary, Run from the Cure, and learning about RSO and seeing how much this extract was really helping people, that really blew my mind and really hit home and gave a lot of us a whole new level of pride, that, wow, we're not just a bunch of dirty criminals running around in the hills. We're medicine makers, we're healers. And that when we put a lot of intention into growing this plant, especially, with regenerative practices and growing clean medicine and putting a lot of intention into this isn't just to make money, money, money. I'm trying to grow the cleanest product, knowing that this could literally save lives. It was a big turning point for a lot of people.
If marijuana was seen as a kind of all-purpose medicine with the least dangerous side effect profile, it would be the logical first choice for many, many conditions.
Cannabis works as a medicine because our bodies are wired for it. Deep inside us is the endocannabinoid system, a network of receptors spread through the brain, nerves, the immune system, even the gut. Its job is balance, regulating pain, inflammation, appetite, mood, memory, and stress.
The cannabis plant has these, 60 plus cannabinoids, plus all the terpenes and flavonoids and other compounds in there. And in addition to that, you've got the human endocannabinoid system, which is complex, but it's also uniquely matched to the cannabinoid profile of cannabis, so that it's really a holistic system that balances out your body.
The compounds in cannabis aren't foreign to us. They mirror the very molecules our bodies make on their own. People living with chronic pain get a moment that feels like themselves again. It's not mysticism, it's chemistry. A plant and a body speaking the same biological language, one we're only just beginning to understand. And for all its impact, the endocannabinoid system was missing from medicinal school until very recently. Even today, most doctors graduate barely knowing it exists.
We didn't learn much about cannabis other than that it was one of the controlled substances. We didn't know about the past research. Nowadays, they are doing more education on it. I don't know how much they are doing in Michigan's medical school, but a number of medical schools are teaching more about the endocannabinoid system.
For decades, cannabis carried a reputation it never earned. People were warned it would turn you into a criminal, a dropout, or somebody permanently glued to a couch. As if one joint was all it took to ruin your life. The science never backed that up, but the scare campaigns sure did. Those old fears stuck around so long that even today, with dispensaries next to coffee shops, some folks still whisper the word cannabis like it's Voldemort. The stereotypes didn't just shape opinions, they shaped laws.
That was what I faced a lot being a pre-215 patient, was the stigma of the Cheech and Chong. Oddly enough, I would actually ask Tommy Chong. One time I was in a smoking circle with him. I asked Tommy, I was like, gotta ask you a question. My elders tend to think that, your movies set back the movement potentially years because of the controversy that you came out with. He took a big hit, exhaled it, passed it to me. He's like, look, kid, I get you. But you got to understand something. It was the early 70s, and it was the darkest days. The only way we could cut through there was through comedy, and that's how we did. And that struck a chord with me because I would travel around the country talking about medical cannabis, and people would laugh at me and be like, oh, you're just doing it so you can get high.
The first time I went to a dispensary and saw real sick people in there, it's like, oh, this is no joke. There are real sick people here getting their medicine because they got nowhere else to go.
It was obvious that we needed to take the patients off of the battlefield. We needed to carve out some protections for them, because while they're dealing with their illness, they didn't need to be dealing with the law and their vulnerability to arrest and all the ramifications that come with once you are arrested or thrown in jail. So that's why Prop 215 was an important first step, but we always saw it as a first step, not as the end point, because everybody also needs that protection too.
In 1996, California's Prop 215 became the first law in the nation to legalize medical marijuana. It cracked the door open. By 2016, Prop 64 blew it wider, launching the recreational market and proving something millions already believed. Cannabis is largely safe, widely useful, and far less dangerous than the federal Schedule I label stamped on it since 1970.
When 215 passed in 96, we really thought, okay, this could be the layers of protection. And as medical cannabis developed, we all started following these state regulations. I formed my own collective. I had my own patients. You could sign up with me. I had hundreds and hundreds of patients that, through a dispensary, through a collective that I'm going to be growing for. Signage at our farm saying this garden is being cultivated for this dispensary. Here, before you're going to be held liable if you destroy this. Here is the lawyer's contact information. And those types of layers of protection helped us for a little while, could potentially scare off law enforcement. And then law enforcement figured out, if we just bring one Fed with us on the raid, it doesn't matter if they have any medical cannabis protections there, because we'll say, oh, well, we've got a Fed with us and this is still federally legal, so sorry, we have to raid the whole thing. So they figured out their ways of getting around it. We figured out our ways of trying to get around it. It was a real cat and mouse situation, but the whole time we're just wanting to grow medicine for patients and provide for our families and live in the hills, you know, what is now completely legal and celebrated, but we were literally hunted and vilified for it.
Of course, the drug companies wanted it not to be seen as a rival to their drugs. They did not want people taking it for insomnia or depression or appetite or whatever. They had their drugs. They wanted to sell you for that.
Doctors here in Berkeley, including who I talked about, Dr. Todd Mikaria and Dr. Frank Lucido, were attacked by then the drug czar, and was basically accused of being bad humans, and they wanted to put the doctors in jail just for talking about cannabis with their patients. So Dr. Todd and Dr. Lucido sued and would end up winning the right for doctor confidentiality protected between the doctor and the patient.
Slowly, a couple years into it, these 215 doctors, who a lot of them were green rushing, snake oil salesmen who barely had a medical license, but could make $200 to $300 writing these prescriptions. And the very first of these doctors came up into our neighborhood, and the neighbors threw a party, and he stuck around partying for 3 days. And I mean, this guy partied his ass off. He was so high on acid the first time we went to our meeting, we couldn't have our appointment. We had to come back the next day. So these doctors were, you know, we called him Dr. Feelgood, and he would write you a prescription and give you about a 10-minute long interview, and we all had degenerative joint disease, and this was a layer of protection that if you got pulled over, maybe you wouldn't get arrested if you had a small personal use amount. If law enforcement came to your garden, came to your farm, and you had these notes, they're probably still cutting your plants down, but they're probably not going to charge you. Maybe they'll just walk away.
Some people started opening up dispensaries, and that was so exciting.
Well, Proposition 215 was mute on the topic of commerce. It said that caregivers could grow for patients and patients could grow their own cannabis, but it didn't say that patients could reimburse their caregivers for the cannabis. We just decided that's just implied. I mean, come on, guys. It didn't say that we could organize collectively and pool our resources together. It kind of said collective or cooperatively, that we could kind of collectively or cooperative. So dispensaries were like, we saw that word collective. You know, we're a collective and we're caregivers, and we feel like caregivers should be remunerated. So we would always be very careful to stay within the boundaries of what we thought a jury of our peers would agree to. So that's one of the things that we definitely had to do, educate the whole world about how to be a good citizen when the government's gone haywire and we're just trying to get people medicine.
Once we had medical, we were able to transition from growing in the forest into growing in full sun out in our front yard again. This is when the big plants came about, and big, 300-gallon pots, people spending a lot of money on soil to be able to grow. That was really the first big green rush, where neighborhoods could no longer control who was buying up the parcels that came up available in their neighborhood, where people started coming in with big bucks, kind of overpaying for some, we saw a big jump in real estate prices. People would come in from outside the community, buy something up, level it, throw in 100 big smart pots and one worker in a trailer, and pull 1,000 pounds. And medical enabled a lot of these green rushers to come in, capitalize on what had until then been a very tight-knit, closed community.
It was exciting at first, to get it to the level where people were feeling pretty like they can really access their medicine through dispensaries before they started, the legislature really started getting on board and regulating it. And then it became a little more difficult.
Proposition 215 law would spark many different reactions across every spectrum of the legal world.
Proposition 215, in my perspective, was a very poor initiative because it didn't actually legalize any of our activities. All it did was allow us to present what's called a medical necessity defense after we were busted. So after your dogs were shot, after your garden was cut down, after the raid happened, and after they dragged you down, and after you bailed out, and after you got lawyers, only then could you maybe go in front of a judge if it was state and present this, hey, please go easy on me, I have a medical condition defense. And sometimes it didn't help in state court either. But in federal court, they completely dismissed it. Had the initiative been written differently, like Proposition 64 was in 2016, which actually legalized our activities, legalized cannabis for adults 21 and over, then the 10th Amendment and another thing called Section 903 of the Controlled Substances Act, which is basically a little admission in the Controlled Substances Act saying we acknowledge the 10th Amendment, so nothing in this is construed to conflict with pre-existing state laws because, you know, as the 10th Amendment reads, if the powers weren't delegated to them, they can't take them. They are a reserve for the state. So these laws, when they passed them, they didn't expect there to be conflict. So they didn't think that Section 903 was ever going to probably be a problem. But now with legalization in Colorado and Oregon and Washington and California and everywhere else, there's not a lot they can do, because if they were to go in and bust me like for growing pot now, like they did in 97, the first thing we could present is a 10th Amendment dismissal, say, hey, here's a motion to dismiss, you don't have jurisdiction, you don't have proof of commerce, leave us alone.
1996 really caused an uproar from a patient perspective. So that's when you saw the first generation of dispensaries open. Jeff Jones, Lynette Shaw, Dennis Peron's Compassion Center, or as the feds called it, the 5-story felony over there on Market Street. These pioneers took the risk by selling cannabis directly. Now, why does that matter? One, because Proposition 215 only allows for community growing and sharing of cannabis. It does not allow for sales. However, that's just not how the world works. And dealing in cannabis is always has come at risk. This is really generational realities that many generations of dealers have felt. It's just in 1998, that's when the feds came through and threatened the original 7 dispensaries and said, if you do not close your doors, we're going to kick your door in by this date. And everybody closed their doors and quietly walked away. And the patients cried out, where is our cannabis? Where is our access?
Our number one issue was not getting arrested and not seeing our friends getting arrested or everybody getting arrested for marijuana. It just didn't seem like it had to be that way. We should have the right to grow in our yard, and we should have the right to, you know, grow our own. And if people want to go to a store and get it, or a coffee shop or things like that, they should have that right too.
There is magic within this plant. You cure a few people from cancer, it changes your life. And all of these things are hard to prove, you know what I mean? But Rick Simpson, Oil Phoenix Tears, to say it's life-changing is a simple statement. To say it'll change the world is already proven, so.
When we first started the dispensary situation, the California Tax Agency, I forget what it was called, they wouldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole. You could be like, I want to pay taxes on my weed. I'm selling it to people. It's a sale. I want to pay. They'd be like, we are not taking your money. We don't want to talk to you. We don't know anything about this. No. We got a sales permit and we're paying taxes on the mugs and the t-shirts. So we had a license to pay sales tax. We weren't paying on the weed, okay? So when they finally decided one day, they're like, well, we want the sales tax, right? They said that if you had been paying tax on your t-shirts and mugs, you only had to pay back sales tax on your cannabis for 3 years. Because we were an ongoing interest, we had a pretty successful dispensary. We made a payment plan, we paid it off, done deal. Other people, had a harder time of it. But yeah, just one day they're like, oh yeah, we want the tax money now.
Recreational cannabis, Prop 64 was all about time for the state to make some money off this cash cow. You guys have all made all the money tax-free long enough.
The taxes are terrible. And then where does that tax money really go? That's really what I would, like, how do we check where that goes? How can we put that back into good use or something? I think if we could see that it was going back to something, we would all not be so pissed. But we all know that it goes into a bottomless pit of nothingness.
You know, legislators trying to get them to do the right thing is sometimes difficult. Trying to get them to take your money, very easy.
These guys came in though, they weren't trying to make money off growing and distributing and selling cannabis. They're trying to make money off investor capital. They're in a completely different industry than we were in. We were just little pawns. We had no idea.
Once municipalities around California realized that the tax income that could be coming to them if they just taxed and regulated, that's where we got the spread of dispensaries. They didn't go everywhere because we still have a lot of places in California, like maybe 65% of the state or something like that still doesn't have dispensaries. But everybody else was like, sign us up. They're taxing the heck out of cannabis. So this is where I think the correction's coming in, right? People don't go to dispensaries anymore because they can get cannabis from their friends still who are growing it on the illicit market, just like they've been doing for 100 years. The quality is still high and the price is often free. So yeah, it's created a kind of dual system where the underground economy is alive and well, and dispensaries are just like, instead of being places of healing, places where patients come, they're places that patients avoid because of the high taxation. I don't remember the numbers. The biggest number I remember is we had a forfeiture. LAPD and the Department of Justice got together and they forfeited our bank account. They took our sales tax money. Okay, here's the thing. Once they made us start paying sales tax, right? This is a memory. Wow. How are you going to save up your sales tax? You have to pay it using a check or something like that, right? Or do a bank transfer. So all of a sudden, where we've never put any money in our bank account, we have to start saving money in our bank account over at Bank of America. So our taxes end up being about $100,000 a month. So month one, $100,000 goes in and goes out to the thing. Month two, $100,000 goes in and goes out to the month three. Feds take the $100,000 like 2 or 3 days before it's due to the State Board of Equalization. Next day, we wake up with negative. They put a negative amount in our bank account. We have negative $999,999,999 in the bank account. So I'm a negative billionaire all of a sudden. We got up in arms. We got in touch with the head of the tax agency, and we got in touch with a very supportive member of the legislature. And they both had a fit. The tax agency in California actually tried to get the Department of Justice to give them the money. They're like, you just took our money. But I mean, the feds aren't giving the money back. You know what I mean? They kept the money. Yeah, that's what happened to us, right, when we had to start paying sales tax. So a lot of the early operators, like, we came out of the cannabis field. We don't know anything about taxes. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the early dispensary operators just did not know business. They got into debt. That tax situation, when the state decided they wanted 3 or 8 years worth of back taxes, that's when a lot of the oldies but goodies had to say uncle. And in came the sharks who were already swimming around, right? And started scooping people up at, well, we'll take over your business for the cost of paying your taxes. Because if you don't let us do that, then guess what? You're going to have to owe those taxes to the state. So operators ended up having to, like, basically just scramble out of their own businesses, sell to business people who then took over the burden of taxation. That's where we're at right now. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the heart has gone out of the cannabis industry, trying to create a business.
Proposition 215 left us with a lot of legal challenges as we saw other states come online legally. One of them was, of course, Washington State, which originally posted its law to be medicinal, but then when its recreational law happened, they basically folded up medicinal altogether.
Richard Lee, who was the granddaddy of Oaksterdam, which was a big center of pot culture and development in Oakland and dispensaries. Richard decided to sponsor a legalization initiative called Prop 19.
I was a big supporter of Prop 19, which was very controversial at the time in my community. Most people were not supportive of legalization because the medical / traditional black market was working just fine. Prices were still high, everyone was making lots of money. People said, why change anything?
I didn't like the way it was written particularly. And I felt that was sort of difficult to implement.
A lot of us knew that it was only a matter of time. Things were going to change. Regulation was going to come. We were going to see it. Colorado had already legalized and other states were looking at it. A lot of us were really embarrassed that California wasn't the first to legalize, you know? And we certainly should have learned a lot from Colorado's mistakes because they really opened it up to big players and it wiped out the mom and pops, and now they have an industry where nobody's making any money and the quality's terrible and it sucks.
Richard was really in a hurry to get it on the ballot in 2010. And I said, well, look, you know, I think our time is coming, but the polls are not quite strong enough yet. I mean, we're over 50% maybe, but in the polls, but you know, you want to be closer to 60 when you do an initiative. And besides, this 2010 is going to be an off-year election, and it's going to be a bad year for the liberals, which it turned out to be a disastrous year for the liberals. So that initiative failed.
The initiative failed, back to the dark ages. What happened when it did not pass is the feds took that opportunity to come in and destroy the medical cannabis industry in California. They raided dispensaries all up and down the state, sent letters to landlords so that dispensaries were shuttered. There was over 150 dispensaries in San Diego. 2 months later, there was less than 10 dispensaries open. So they really took that opportunity. They went into Mendocino and shut down the 9.31 cultivation program. And then the county in Humboldt killed our ordinance that we were working on. And so now in Mendo, all these gardens that were 99 plants permitted from the sheriff, they cut the ordinance back to 25 plants. So now all of us had come out, paid the sheriff, had inspections, expanded our grows, invested all this money. We're now told, you're now illegal. Your operation's now illegal unless you cut it back to 25% of what you're growing. And none of us did, and I got raided 3 years later by the sheriff and, you know, spent 2 years on probation and 200 hours of community service and paid an $80,000 fine, and it really screwed my life up. I have not financially recovered since then, and I have not commercially grown since 2017 was my last time doing a licensed grow. They knew how to extract that dough. They seized my excavator and then they sold it back to me at half value. That was their racket. They would seize as much equipment and property from the farm as they could, anything that was paid off, and then they would try to sell it back to you. And it was, you know, was it organized crime? I mean, I don't know. It was definitely organized, but it was a good racket.
Up until about 2008, we would regularly do a poll and we'd find at best 40% support for legalizing marijuana for general adult use, and usually like more, 45% opposition and strongly opposed. I mean, the strong opposition. And so we wouldn't touch it. But in 2008, right after Obama's election, there was a poll that suddenly came out that showed in the Western United States, at least for the first time, there was a bare majority support for legalizing. As soon as we saw that majority support potential in California, a friend of ours actually, Tom Amiano, assemblyman then, introduced a legalization bill. You know, it was sort of a trial balloon type of thing. And we started organizing for full scale, you know, for a legalization initiative.
The dispensary model kind of served its purpose for a while, but there were still people getting arrested, and we felt we needed to expand it to everybody. And we supported Prop 64 because we thought, okay, it needs to happen in California. This is the initiative that's out there. It wasn't perfect, but we felt like it was going to send the message around the world that the biggest state in the United States had this on the ballot, and we needed to legalize it. We had momentum at that time.
The way Prop 64 was sold to us, to the legacy community, to the farmer community, was you're going to have a 5-year head start. We're not going to let anybody stack licenses. Nobody's going to have more than one license, one grow, one dispensary, whatever it is. You're going to have a 5-year head start. And that got people to vote for it.
Oh, that was an excellent time to smoke. I have a much more positive outlook on this than I did 90 seconds ago. That's great. I love recreational cannabis. I may be one of the few from the old days who believes in it.
Before legalization, a lot of people in the Emerald Triangle saw the writing on the wall. A lot of those green rushers that rushed in immediately rushed out. The minute things started getting difficult, they bailed. And those are probably a lot of the smart ones. Honestly, a lot of the people that stayed were people that were generational, that inherited their farms, didn't have a big $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 mortgage payment. That's the majority of folks that are still in it, and nothing wrong with that. Those are the people we should support. Those are the only people that can still afford to be in it. When recreational pounds are $100 to $300, there's no money in that.
I think it has changed thousands and thousands of lives. I do think a lot of our OGs and our veterans have been left behind, and that breaks my heart. But at the same time, we need to change the world. This is what everybody has died for. Everybody's put their time into. I don't care what generation or what time frame of cannabis you came from. We don't get to choose when it happens.
When I go into stores now, they are much more business places than compassion centers like they used to be.
It was always a community thing also too, because we wanted to be a part of the community, and then when they came to fight us, we wanted our community to stand up for us and fight for us as well. I remember we would do customer appreciation days now, but we would just go and cook a bunch of food and cook food for 200-300 people, and it'd be like, all right, we're doing this on Friday, come down. And I remember my bosses would never make you buy something to get a hamburger, because it's one of those things that, like, if you want food, we're gonna give you food. It's not. It wasn't how it is now, like, oh, you have to show me your receipt to get food, or it's just a lot, it's a lot more business, and it's just not as community as it was.
I think we're gonna hopefully all get back to a place where we can feed our families and live a good life, but no promises. But we're still out here to do it, just because that's, you know, I got into an argument with someone a few days ago, a younger gentleman. You know, someone has to fight the good fight. And I think as long as we're pushing the ball down the road, we're going to end up exactly where we want to be. Where that is, I hope none of us know. I hope it's bigger and different and amazing. But I think recreational cannabis is the next step. There was no choice. We had to do it. Do I like when everybody had a lot more money? Yeah, probably. The weed's different now. It's not better, but it's different. It's clean. It's nice. There's a million different strains, and they're accessible in 1,000 times more places. So, yay for recreational.
It's just sad to see this plant that we love be commoditized and treated like soybeans or a bag of Cheetos or whatever. It's really sad. And the damage that's done to our communities up here in Northern California, communities that had a lot of culture around this, celebration, and a lot of pride, it's heartbreaking to see that devastated and decimated. And there's so little of that left. And when we have a gathering, there's so few people that turn out, and every year there's less farmers that, you know, and people that have to give it up and go find a real job. And these are the people that were the most passionate over the last 30 years and put in work and care about this plant more than anybody. This plant saved their lives. It saved their loved ones' lives. We've seen it heal. We've seen the power that it has. And yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Who would you rather get your cannabis from? When I think about all the people from the past that I encountered during my days in the cannabis industry, so many of them cared. And I would be happy to get my cannabis from people like that. I would trust them. I'm not sure that I trust the people of today the way I trusted the people of the past.
In the old days, you just grew the weed. It's a plant. You grew it, you cut it, you trimmed it, you smoked it, you cured it, you smoked it, you know, and like sometimes, you know, granted, nobody wants to be smoking moldy weed.
No.
Nobody wants to be smoking weed filled with mites or whatever. So yeah, I think having safeguards in place is a good thing in general. But I think they can go too far with it.
Are we better off now? Well, the buying situation is definitely not better off now. It used to be that you could go into a store and you could look at everything and smell everything. Sometimes you could even try things before you bought them. Now, everything is prepackaged. There is no way to smell anything. You might be able to look through like some sort of a window or something. The buying situation is terrible. It's nowhere near as good as it used to be.
That is one really disappointing thing in the whole rollout of the legal markets, is that often the small, experienced legacy growers could not find their way into competing with the bigger growers into the market. So that could be impacting the quality of some of the cannabis that we're seeing these days in the dispensaries.
Yeah, it was definitely like going to a shop back then was like going to kind of a bar, because bartender's like your therapist and like your friend. It definitely was a lot more relationship as opposed to how now it's a lot more like CVS.
Unfortunately, there is no one who oversees the quality of the cannabis.
This is a perishable product. It needs to be transported and stored and handled in a certain way before it reaches the consumer, or the consumer's never going to like what they got. It's not going to be the same thing that left the farm.
The argument for all of these stores and the process of how they work is that you are supposed to have safer, more healthy products on the shelves. And who is responsible for the safety of these products? Well, I'm not sure who is checking to see if these tests are authentic or if these labels are authentic.
Unfortunately, due to Proposition 64 and the loss of so many suppliers and manufacturers of diverse medical needed products, we saw a slow roll out of them.
I was directing a dispensary called Magnolia Wellness of Oakland at that time. I took over directing Magnolia in 2015. That was the glory years. We did whatever we wanted. It was great. It was so great. Yes, we paid our sales tax. We paid city taxes because we had a city license. But we were happy. And we were doing cannabis farmers markets. We were doing events. We were doing demos and booths. We were giving free cannabis to patients. We were doing every kind of social service because we weren't just crippled with the cost of taxation and fees. Then 2018, we had to switch to the Prop 64 model.
The industry already existed. We just needed to bring it into the light. And instead, the feds took that opportunity to smash and grab this thing. So when Prop 64 came around again, it was much worse. There was already these other communities who were looking to get their greedy mitts on it.
We had to get a state license. We couldn't do farmers markets anymore. We couldn't do demos anymore. As far as like having people be able to try the cannabis before or get a free sample of the cannabis. We couldn't give free cannabis anymore. We couldn't even give free cannabis to medical marijuana patients anymore. It was absolutely insane. All of the things that we had wanted to do or that we were doing before just came to a stop, and the only thing we could do was cannabis commerce. We couldn't even sell our books about cannabis cultivation anymore. That wasn't allowed. We couldn't sell a bumper sticker. That wasn't allowed.
When legalization came time, and it was time to build your brand and get licensing and pay taxes and come into compliance, a lot of people were not ready for that. A lot of people stayed in cannabis because they hate permitting and they hate paperwork and they're not good at any of that. You don't have to be good at that to be a good cannabis farmer. Now you do.
So a lot of things were just cut. A lot of the purpose was cut. That's kind of sadly what happened to a lot of people I know. Crippling taxation, corporate takeover, and regrouping.
And you had a lot of people who preyed on these farmers. A lot of these farmers are very naive. They're very, we believe a lot of what we're told. We're easily taken advantage of because we just never had to really deal with too many people. And we want to believe the best in people. So when you tell me, I'm going to be able to get your licensing done for you and no problem, this is a slam dunk, your place can definitely get permitted, and then you spend $50,000, and then a lot of these consultants ran off with people's money. There's been a lot of insurance agents that ran off with people's money. I was part of a class action lawsuit against an insurance agent who screwed my business over along with a bunch of other farms who were literally just trying to get workman's comp for their employees, literally trying to follow the law, and these guys are taking advantage of them. So there was a lot of green rushing, dirty consultants who really made a lot of money on the early days of regulation.
We saw a huge dynamic shift, and we saw a robbery of the small farmer. And those are different stories.
Unfortunately, I was so proud to be part of Prop 64, the legalization effort. I wanted cannabis to be mainstream. I wanted all of us to do well. That's not what happened.
California originally, when they passed Prop 64, was developing a medical industry alongside it, and they just completely did away with that. It's really sad because this all started because of AIDS patients in San Francisco. Dennis Peron, a big cannabis activist who was seeing all his friends and loved ones dying from these withering diseases down there and in the Bay Area, and fought for medical cannabis to ease people's pain in their last bit of their life. And so we've got to realize that that's what this all came from, was helping people, saving lives, easing pain, giving people an alternative to pharmaceuticals. Yeah, we have seen the medical industry just disappear, basically. No more medical dispensaries. Everything's gone to recreational.
Basically, the cannabis that we had access to prior to 64 was reliant on small farmers. Small farmers produced high quality, small batch, not more than 5 kilos per batch of high-grade cannabis per varietal. We were able to package that. Back at the time, it would take 3 weeks to get full testing, so we had to structurally change over the years the expectation of what the farmer was expecting.
I've said it before, they did more in 6 or 7 years of legalization to destroy our culture and way of life than they did in 60 years chasing us as outlaws. When they realized we were going to push it legal, they sat back and they thought of 288. If people aren't aware of that, it's a little-known tax code they used against the moonshiners where you can't deduct anything but the cost of goods. So if any business could only deduct the cost of goods and couldn't deduct the rent, the insurance, the payroll, they wouldn't be able to make it. It's a 75% tax. That's what they did to cannabis people. They were 12,000 brands when legalization hit. There's less than 1,000 left. Most of those are on the ropes right now. And they've destroyed the whole way of life that we created.
We also saw Steve D'Angelo and others lobby the state of California to remove the 5-year protection that was initially given to small farmers to protect the small farmer from large manufactured growers.
Their way of life is gone, their business is gone, and they're bankrupt. You know, and it's like I'm part of that because I evangelized for that, not knowing that Gavin Newsom was going to lie to us and open up the large-scale farming. Gavin Newsom, our governor, promised to not open up large-scale farming for 5 years. It was written into Prop 64.
That alone caused a significant ripple in the cannabis community.
It's the saddest thing. If you look at any other industry, wine, tech, video, I was part of all those. The people that started those industries are titans. They were all titans, and I told people on my stage, name one cannabis brand from the originals that's worth 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars. They're not there. I mean, this was a systematic destruction. So what they did was the worst thing ever done to an industry or community. And the Emerald Triangle is just wiped out because of it. It's bankrupt.
The other thing that's shocking is all these people that risk their lives, that put in hundreds of hours growing and doing everything in the cannabis industry. All of that has no value to any of these businesses, and they just move on with catchy new brand names and new hypey stories, and nobody cares about the people from the past. And that's shocking to me.
What happened to food in America is what's happening to cannabis in America. The ability to scale and lower the cost and squeeze out a craft farmer or a small farmer is politely, good old American business.
The good part is that, like you saw, all of our culture went all over the country and the world, and cannabis got legalized. I said once California went legal, the rest of the country and the rest of the world would fall because of the size and scope and stature of California. That's happened. So, and plant medicine, psychedelics are right behind it. So you're not going to stop this now. Cannabis is out of the box. I'm happy about all that. That's good.
There's always going to be a high end. There's always going to be a craft user. There's always going to be a boutique level for any product on earth. Someone was going to be willing to pay more to get the best. And, you know, for those of us who prefer to challenge ourselves and create the best product we can with the plant, like, that's the market we'll try and seek for. We'll try and stay in. The rest of it's going to be pretty affordable. It's hard to see it in any other light. Everything gets its price dropped. It's just a matter of what we can create as a standard. If we can raise the standard, then we can keep the jobs high and we can keep the industry at a higher level. If the standard is dropped lower and lower, so will the cost of our people.
The community was very torn about 64. I might even go as far as to say a slight majority of people were against it in the cannabis community. A lot of people believe that in Jack Herer's philosophy of legalization, which is that no regulation, no, like, it's a plant, get rid of everything. I should be able to do whatever the hell I want with it. And yeah, that would ultimately be a great goal. I am one of those people who believes that you shouldn't let the perfect be an enemy of the possible. If someone's offering you a giant leap forward towards that vision, that dream, and you say no because it's all or nothing, you're never gonna get to the all if you don't take the steps. So I supported Prop 64. We moved out in 2016, so I voted for Prop 64, keeping people out of prison and keeping people's property from being confiscated. You know, that's important, and that's a big, big thing. So I knew it wasn't perfect. I supported it. I voted for it. I don't regret it. Do I regret some of the side effects of it? Of course. Like, it's not perfect. It could be a lot better, but I think it still was a huge step in the right direction.
And that raises a bigger question. Is regulation of cannabis ultimately a good thing? On one hand, rules bring safety, testing, and consumer protection. On the other, too much regulation raises prices, crushes small businesses, and hands the industry over to big corporations.
When you're growing this plant in your veggie garden next to your tomatoes, you're really mindful of what goes in that soil. And when you are smoking a product that was grown by a faceless brand that's backed by a board of directors of investors who have no connection to that plant, no care, they're just looking at dollars and cents, they don't care how that money is generated. They don't care if it's if you had to spray this product with so much pesticide, these guys will do anything they can to make a dollar. We didn't have equipment that could irradiate your weed back in the day. If the weed was moldy, you threw it away. It went in the compost pile. Now they irradiate it to a level that it'll pass testing, and if it's too visually ugly, it goes into pre-roll or it gets turned into distillate and put into your favorite edible. They will hide it. They will hide the poison any way they can. Ugly, moldy flower, pre-roll, concentrate, and doesn't pass test results. Well, there's labs that you can pay to pass your test results. There are so few credible labs left in the state. I don't know of any. I know the last good one that I know of went out of business 5 years ago because all their competitors you could pay to play. You could pay for a 40% THC test result and clean results.
So what does responsible regulation look like? And who actually benefits when the rules get written?
I would say that it was more competitive in the past. It was more open of a market and more growers and more of the craft growers who were incredible growers that could not make it into the regulated, onerous market of following all these regulations and coming up with all this money to become legal, recognized growers and growing at a smaller scale as well. You can create an incredible product, but it's not as competitive with the other growers who can get to the market.
The misconception is that by adding all these regulations for testing, that you're going to make these products cleaner and more safe to consume because they were cleaner. But the regulations haven't led to these products being more clean. When third parties go and do testing at these dispensaries, they fail the testing. Quite commonly.
The thing that the medical community has found out about cannabis is that it's not just a single thing. It's not just THC. They tried to make Marinol and make that the legally accepted version of marijuana that people could get. What they found, it doesn't work as well and people don't like it as much. The point of it is it's a very complex situation, and one marijuana will work better in one situation, another might work in another. There's a lot of fighting right now. Like people used to say, well, sativa is good for the day, indica is good at night, makes you fall asleep. Well, that's not really the case. It's kind of like either one of them might do it under certain circumstances, depending on your endocannabinoid system and what situation you're in and what the relative ratio of all these things are to each other. And so, it's not something where science can just say, this is it, and that's the answer to all the things, and it's like a button you push in and so forth. Cannabis is not going to be like that. It's complex. And that's what makes it so special, frankly, because it's got all these buffers and things that affect you in different ways that balance it all out. Instead of one chemical that's just jarring you, you've got all these things that are working integrated with your whole body system in such a way as to improve your overall health and well-being.
The big argument in cannabis is regulation. Do we need all kinds of rules to make sure that these products are safe? Are these regulations just ways to make more profit, or are they actually providing us with safer medicine?
The world has always been built on small farmers and small brands, and it's always been proven that the larger you get, the more you lose control over quality and commitment to decency and whatnot.
Prop 64 has really been devastating for this community. Leading up to it, there was a promise of an acre cap and 5 years to give these small growers a chance to get established in the industry, establish relationships with dispensaries. We have this distributor model, which was adopted from the alcohol model, where a farmer has to sell it to a distributor who then sells it to retail. The distributor collects the taxes, does the testing. That model does not work for cannabis. And a lot of these distributors who came from alcohol, did not know cannabis. Don't understand it, don't understand the quality, don't understand where it comes from. So you have an industry that's in turmoil. There was not enough retail outlets. You have too many farmers. They did away with that acre cap. So immediately you had in Monterey and Salinas and Palm Springs, giant grows that have popped up. This one in Palm Springs is only not even 100% online, and it's producing more flower than the whole state can consume. I wonder where it's all going. It's not staying here. So it's unfortunate because if they had left that acreage cap in, you'd still see a thriving community here in the Emerald Triangle. You'd see a lot more farms still in place. You'd be getting medicine from people who actually care, who actually have a relationship with this plant, consider it their own medicine, and are growing it in their gardens next to their food, or trying to grow the highest quality product possible. Instead now, you have these companies all answer to investors now, who have no connection. All they say, they look at the quarterly reports and they say, make more money next month. And if that means cutting corners, if that means breaking laws, if that means doing really dirty things, if that means not paying farmers, not paying the distributors, it means you got to answer to those shareholders. So it's a very different industry than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So it's hard to see the current state of the cannabis industry. They want to do away with medical altogether, and you go in a dispensary and they don't know about medical, and it's crazy to me.
I'm still in the industry, so I say I have, millions and millions of happy memories. I also, credit the industry with most of the great things in my life. So my family, my son, sad memories also definitely exist. But I also think, the line from the great butterscotch is, you have to experience great sadness to understand true happiness.
Really grateful I still get to grow a few plants in my yard and still be around so many passionate people that are still doing it and still finding their way to keep growing it. And there's still a lot in the rec market. We still have a lot of amazing small farmers from the Emerald Triangle up here and all over NorCal still doing it the way they always have, trying to do it the way they always have. Yeah, that culture still exists. Those farms still exist. They're hard to find, but if you can seek them out, you can still experience that. A culture that's 50 years deep now, that was handed down to them by their parents and their grandparents, and they're handed down to their kids. And it still exists. It's just getting harder to find.
I understand what we had to go through to feel the way we do. Some of this stuff is toughness, some of this stuff is understanding what was coming, because we didn't have a straight road, even when it did legalize. Like, you know, this is one of the harder points that the industry is ever going to face. But, you know, for those of us that have been here for a long time, it's not the hardest it's ever been. Not even close. It's just harder than it was when everything was great.
It's been a rough road, but it has been so incredibly rewarding. Nothing like it. There's nothing like it. I couldn't even imagine dedicating my life to something that's been more enjoyable or beneficial both to myself and to other people. And I intend to stay on the journey. For myself, I need a facility again. I'm an operator. In my future is a cannabis restaurant, on-site consumption facility, that we have a community again, that we're together, enjoying each other, enjoying our time together, and absolutely having the best weed that we possibly can. The best cannabis on the planet, the best cannabis, nicest people. It is a combo that is so simple. I can't wait to get my hands on a facility again. So that's my future.
I'm amazed that it's now been 29 years since we passed that initiative, and the federal government still hasn't made medical marijuana legal, although they're moving halfway there with this attempt to reschedule it, but there's still a ways to go. But I think, it's over 35 states now have medical marijuana laws, and about 40 foreign countries now have legal medical marijuana.
If you don't want a society to thrive, then you can look at the actions of the people that are running it, and you can see. And it's very clear that this society is not being made to thrive, because look what they're doing to us. People can't afford food, they can't get medicine, they're having to pay so much, they're getting really crappy medicine in these dispensaries, which is generic, and they're having to pay all these taxes for it. And that's what they wanted. What they wanted was just generic medicine going out to people. People don't even know what real cannabis tastes like anymore.
And where is cannabis going? I'm not sure it's going anywhere good.
The current state of the cannabis industry, well, it looks more like any industry right now. Any industry that is commercial. Because the focus is now more on the packaging than what's inside of the package. It's more about the branding, and do you have a celebrity endorsement? And does your Happy Meal come with a toy? It's no longer about anything. It's not about medicine or patients or alternative medicine or supporting small farmers or communities that have decades of experience and culture behind this. It's literally erased everything that made this thing so special and unique, and it's replaced with marketing.
We just lost everything that was legalized in the Farm Bill, basically, and I don't see anything on the horizon that looks wonderful. I will say that I went to an event at a lounge in Hollywood recently, and it was a try before you buy type of event. And that was really, really cool. It reminded me of how it should always be at these kind of places. And hopefully we get more things like that in the future. But it seems like cannabis is going towards more regulation, not less. And that is always going to be worse for the patients.
The loophole always is there. How you find it, how much you take advantage of it, all those things are sort of in the middle. That's why laws continue to change, continue to progress.
The national polls show that a great majority of Americans want it legal, and they think it deserves it, and even a higher percentage. I think it's like close to 90% of people believe in medical marijuana, that should definitely be legal, and that's not even legal in the United States yet, which is ridiculous.
So we're kind of in a regrouping mode, I would say, with the medical cannabis industry and the cannabis industry at large. Nothing wrong with that. It's a good time to regroup. You know, we saw what happened, but yeah, we got to regroup.
The process of change in the cannabis world is going to be never-ending. It's never gonna stop. We're gonna be in every industry, in every country, in every store. It's not gonna be what everybody thought it was. It's gonna be something closer to, I don't know, water.
I never did this to be famous, rich, or anything else. I've been blessed to have a lot of things happen that would have never happened to me otherwise. I just did it because it was the right thing to do at the time. I didn't have any choice. It's like when we first started this and I first got famous. by giving away millions of dollars worth of cannabis to most of the bakers and candy makers and many dispensaries and mostly dentists in San Francisco during the height of the AIDS. Worth every bit of it. I'd do it all over again if it would bring us to where we are now.